Hi, everyone. We're just going to wait for everybody to sign on and we'll get this going. My name is Michael Miller. I'm a publicist here at HarperCollins. And welcome to the virtual IndieFest event for Tom King's newest release, Sufferance, an instant national bestseller in Canada. We are so pleased you could join us, and we'd like to thank all of the great bookstores supporting this series, and thank you all as well for supporting your local bookstore. Though connected virtually, we would like to acknowledge that our meeting is hosted on Indigenous land and Dish with One Spoon territory. This is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. HarperCollins gratefully acknowledges these Indigenous nations for their guardianship of this land. We ask that you treat the presenter's work with respect and that your questions refrain from harassment of any sort. HarperCollins Canada strives to provide an environment that is welcoming and inclusive for all. We will be accepting audience questions, so please feel free to send those through in the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. And now I would like to introduce our fantastic moderator for the evening, Sheila Rogers. Sheila is a veteran broadcast journalist. She is the host of and a producer for The Next Chapter on CBC Radio. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission named her an honorary witness to the testimonies of residential school survivors. It was a life-changing honor. 100 years ago, Sheila's great-grandmother Edith was the first woman and the first Métis woman to be elected to the Manitoba Legislative Assembly. She was an advocate for social change. Sheila hopes to live the rest of her life honoring her great-grandmother. Sheila has a long relationship with Thomas King. She first heard of him on the Dead Dog Cafe Comedy Hour, which was 15 minutes on CBC Radio. In the last season of the Dead Dog Cafe Comedy Hour, Tom used her laugh as a sound effect to break glass. Her first interview with him was in 1989 when his novel Medicine River was published. They became friends when Sheila moved to the Guelph area, and it's possible that the dog named Soldier in Truth and Bright Water and the back of the turtle was an amalgam of her two dogs, a Schnauzer and a St. Bernard, Bad Breath and Slobbery Jowls. She is honored to be with you this evening talking with Tom about his latest novel, Sufferance. And now I'd like to turn things over to Sheila to introduce and welcome Tom. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the event. Over to you, Sheila.
Thank you very much, Michael, and I'm really delighted to be here. Good evening, everyone. I'm joining you from the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Nanaimo First Nation in what is known as British Columbia. And I acknowledge that I live out my life here. I offer my respect to the Nanaimo people. The land that I live on is stolen land. I encourage everyone who is with us this evening to think for a moment about whose land you are on, because it's important to know the truth. I'm very happy to be here. Thomas King is one of my favorite writers, and he is a dear friend. He's someone who has thought very deeply about storytelling. You know that in 2004, he was the first Indigenous person to give the CBC Massey lectures, and I was hosting the Vancouver leg of Tom's Massey lecture tour. And no gassing on at a podium for him. It was very dramatic. And so to great applause, he came out on stage, walked to a standing light, turned it on, sat down in a rocking chair, and he began to read. And he drew us all in. The book that resulted from the lecture series is The Truth About Stories. And I've heard so many people quoting The Truth About Stories is That's All We Are, from Murray Sinclair, the former chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, to Cherie Demeline, the author of The Marrow Thieves. Tom has told me his fiction is a blueprint for the imagination. If people are interested in the questions that I ask, great. If not, hopefully they've enjoyed the story. In Sufferance, Tom delivers both. Jeremiah Camp is the protagonist. He has an amazing ability to see patterns in human behavior, which his billionaire boss has used to turn into profit and power. Jeremiah's skill earns him the nickname the Forecaster, but after almost 30 years of forecasting, he understands something so shocking that he suddenly quits, runs away, and tries to hide from the world. He's not successful. He moves to a former residential school on the outskirts of a small town, but he can't escape. There are the locals to contend with. There is former boss's daughter. She hunts him down looking for one more forecast. Thomas King joins me today from his home in Guelph to talk about sufferance. Tom,
Hey,
hi.
Sheila,
Hey, great to see you again.
look at
Great.
that. The technology worked.
It is a miracle. It is a miracle. We did a test on Friday to make sure that this was going to work. And it was our usual levity and hilarity. And just mere hours later, we learned of the mass grave at Kamloops Indian Residential School. Tom, 215 children.
Yep.
How are you dealing with what you heard? I don't even want to call it news, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not a surprise. Anybody who's surprised by it hasn't been paying attention for the last 100 years. Native people from all nations have been talking about the deaths that occurred at those schools across Canada and in the U.S. They've talked about the bodies that have been buried in and around the reserves. And frankly, for all those years, people either weren't interested or they didn't believe it or they didn't care. Any number, you can mix and match those reasons. And so now, it's almost sardonically humorous that all of a sudden people are going, oh my God, oh, look at that. Native people knew about that, knew about those graves. And it'll be interesting to see if they go to the other schools and start looking around with ground radar, what is it called?
Detection.
Detection, whatever it is, to see.
Earth penetrating radar. Anyway,
Earth penetrating radar, just to find out where other graveyards are unmarked graveyards or just burying spots for some of the native kids who were there. So I'm not surprised. I'm horrified, but it's that kind of, come on, guys, this has been going on for a long time. Nobody's paid any attention to it. Now we are okay. So the question becomes, what do you do about it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not much on gestures and apologies and tokens. If those things don't lead to action, then they're simply empty. And they don't have any, I don't care how heartfelt they are. If they don't lead to some kind of positive action, then they're basically worthless, really. I mean, I know some people would argue with me and say, no, these things are important. But if they don't go anyplace, what good are they? So we'll see.
Yeah, you happen to know the Deputy Minister of Apologies and Gestures, I understand.
Oh dear. Sheila's referring to the fact that I've just taken up filmmaking. I've been left with a camera unsupervised, and you're gonna play that, are you? Is that what you're thinking about doing?
Charlie, are we able to play it? Yeah, just give me a second. We need a second. We need a second.
How about taking an hour or just getting off the show and I can get away with my skin?
All right. It's only 2 minutes long, and I'd say it's worth waiting for, and sufferance was worth waiting for as well.
It's 1 minute long.
Yeah, that's right. It's coming. It's coming. Charlie is crossing the studio. Charlie is he's my technical director and husband. So, and he's actually helping Tom with understanding how audio works.
Oh, he is. He's wonderful.
Are we ready?
You're ready.
Okay, we're ready. Here comes the audio, Tom.
All right.
We can't do the video, but we've got the audio.
Oh, you can't do the video. That's too bad. But okay, sure.
Yep. Okay. All right. We're not quite there yet. This is a very very ad hoc thing that we're doing.
Maybe we should forget about this until the thing goes with the video.
Charlie?
Yeah, we're there now.
We're there now. Here it comes.
All right.
Maybe not.
Dun 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 dun.
We need a sound effect. The only one I have handy is the one that breaks glass. Nobody wants that.
Ba-da-da-da-da.
Charlie?
Yeah, I think we should give this up.
Should we give it up, Charlie? All right. What we're going to, he will give me the high sign, and maybe it will be the real high sign this time. The reason, I mean, I would bring this up with you anyway, but there's an incredible resonance in your novel with your protagonist, Jeremiah Kemp, who lives in an old residential school.
Yeah.
And his passion is taking rocks and chiseling the names of students who died at the residential school, getting rid of the crosses in the yard and
Yeah.
replacing them with stone.
Yeah.
What's behind that passion for him, Tom?
Well, it's kind of an oddball thing with my writing. When I was writing The Inconvenient Indian, when I finished that and was published at the same time, Idle No More started up. Mm-hmm. And so people looked at it and said, "Oh, Tom, you must have written that book to match up with Idle No More." Well, I've been writing the book for I don't know how many years, and Idle No More had been preparing for I don't know how many years. We just happened to come together in that moment. And the same thing sort of happened with Sufferance. I didn't know that the news item about the graves in Kamloops was going to come up at about the same time Sufferance came out. But it does have a graveyard at an old residential school. I've known about these for years. They're doing my own research, and so I wanted to use it in a novel, and there it is. I've always thought it was a little strange to see those old residential school graveyards with the crosses marking the grave, because I really don't think of those as the proper kinds of markers for those kids. They didn't ask to be Christians. They were forced into a Christian situation. Their language was destroyed. Their culture was destroyed. Many of them didn't make it out of the school alive. Tuberculosis, malnutrition, influenza, sexual, physical abuse, all those things. And so then they get buried, if they get buried at all with any markers, with the Christian cross. So when Jeremiah gets to the school, one of his first jobs is to begin pulling those crosses up and replacing them with something that's a bit more on the natural side. So he finds the rocks from the river and he chisels the names of the students into those rocks and puts the rocks over the grave. And that's sort of the best I can do to make up, as a writer, to make up for the horror of residential schools and the deaths of those kids.
Tom, I am assured that we have the audio.
I should preface.
You should preface it a little.
I should preface this. When everybody started talking about the residential schools and what was going to happen, and we're going to look into this and all that, I've heard all this before, and it kind of got me a little bit angry. And like I say, I've got this camera now, which I shouldn't have. It should be taken out of my hands and locked away someplace. I decided to make a sort of small Government of Canada video for everyone. And so you're only getting the audio, but there's a video portion too that goes along with it. So it's too bad we can't do both, but we'll do just with the audio portion of a message by someone other than the Government of Canada is the title of it.
Here we go.
Good afternoon. Bonjour. I'm Mackenzie MacDonald,
really
the Deputy
working,
Minister for Apologies and Gestures.
Okay.
I wish to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from unceded and traditional land. Greetings from the Government of Canada. It has come to our attention that mass graves have been discovered at the former sites of native residential schools. I want to assure you that the RCMP will be investigating these new and shocking revelations. In addition, I'm calling upon the premiers of all the provinces to begin a meaningful dialogue with their Aboriginal shareholders to address common concerns and to celebrate our shared history. Here in Ottawa, all flags on Parliament Hill will be flown at half-mast, and the color for the week is orange. Thank you. Merci. Miigwech.
Thank you, Tom.
Uh-huh.
The video is going to be great too, but again, you have this amazing gift of I've said that you wield humor like a scalpel, and you barely feel it going through until you're really bleeding.
Yeah, well, I can hit with a hammer too
Yeah.
if I need to, but scalpels are better.
Oh, I think we may still be on. Yeah. Yeah.
Are we on?
Okay. We're good. There. I'm getting somebody else's video in my ears. Okay.
Louis Masgate disappeared in July 1981.
Me
Can you
too.
hear?
Yeah.
It was found.
Who's that?
I'm not sure who that is.
That disappeared.
This is really interesting.
We've been hacked.
Yeah, it's not here, but Tom, you have a scene. I really will get into the novel now. There is a scene where representatives of the ministry show up in the town of Gleaming because they have a big announcement. Will you tell us about that scene?
Yeah, the ministry has come to town, Ministry of Indian Affairs, whatever else they're called. They've come to town to try to deal with a mold problem in trailers on the reserve. The trailers were substandard. Mold formed, and the people have been getting sick from black mold in their trailers. And they have a solution, and the solution is cans of a thing called lock mold. And what you do is you take lock mold and you spray it on the mold, and it locks the bad mold up into this little cocoon, I guess, and everybody's happy. One of the guys sprays a bit of the lock mold on the car of the minister, and it happens to take the paint off. So it can sort of tell you what this stuff is like. But of course, the irony is that it doesn't solve the problem. It's like so much else that happens with Indian affairs. It simply covers it up. And so you get this lovely white foam that goes over the black mold in the trailers, and nothing else changes.
Tom, the story it follows the protagonist, Jeremiah Camp. We've talked a little bit about this before, but it took me about 52 pages before I understood that Jeremiah wasn't talking to anybody else.
Right.
Everybody's talking at him, but he doesn't respond. What were you doing here with a protagonist that doesn't speak?
Well, I wanted to create a protagonist who had been so not destroyed, but so distraught by the world that he saw, the world that he had been a part of, the world that he could see coming down the pike, that he just didn't want to talk anymore. He just wanted to find a place that he could hide away and be left alone. Well, that's hard for anybody to find in this world, even if you're J.D. Salinger. So while he doesn't talk and doesn't want to talk, he's said enough, and nothing he can say is going to change the world as far as he's concerned. Other people do talk to him, and they talk to him as though he's talking back to them. And so they just anticipate what he might say, and that's fine with Jeremiah. He doesn't really care. He sort of floats through this world as best he can, and as best he can isn't all that great, because the people on the reserve and the people in the town really aren't about to let him get away with that, and they don't. And so he has to navigate a number of characters who want him to be a part of the community in some cases. And he doesn't want that. And so he stays silent. And actually, it was kind of fun to write a character who didn't speak. You know what he's thinking, but you never hear him talk. I think more people should do that. There are lots of people that I listen to that I wish I hadn't.
What does it mean to the other characters then to be addressing someone who doesn't speak back to them?
Doesn't seem to bother them, does it?
Not
Uh,
much.
I mean, I know people. I tend to be, believe it or not, I tend to be on the quiet side. Just like to live in my own little space. And people talk to me all the time, and sometimes I wish they wouldn't, and I try to discourage them by not talking, but that doesn't work either, because if you don't talk, the other person will carry both sides of the conversation for you, and that's where Jeremiah finds himself in that situation. And it's the situation I find myself in from time to time too, so I know it fairly well, and it's a curious situation to be in. So I wanted to try to recreate that curiosity and that ambivalence and that kind of, I don't know, a strange worldliness that Jeremiah possesses from time to time.
He has connections to this community, though.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
are they?
Well, he was born in that community. He's a member of that First Nations community, Cradle River First Nations. But he was taken away very early on and wound up in foster care for the rest of his young life. And by the time he got out of foster care and got into university, whatever connection he had with the community is long gone. And he wouldn't even come back there, except that his boss, this billionaire character, for whatever reason, we never do know why, the billionaire bought the old residential school that was on the Cradle River First Nations Reserve and gave it to Jeremiah. He knew Jeremiah was originally from there way back when, and maybe it was a little bit of fun that the guy was having with Jeremiah, who knows. But anyway, he buys a residential school for Jeremiah, gives it to him just before the billionaire dies. And so now Jeremiah, who has no place else to go when the novel opens, has returned to the Cradle River Reserve and is returned to the residential school because that's what he has, and it's as good a place as any.
Will you describe the world that he is fleeing from?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what that world looks like, although I know it's a scary place. And one of the things that makes it scary is that Jeremiah has been able to see that there are people in the world who will do absolutely anything to get what they want. And these are that special class of the ultra rich billionaires, if you want to call them that. I don't have a good name for them. But there's a certain segment of that population. It's not a big population, about 2,000, 3,000 billionaires in the world, I think, at last count. Anyway, some of these people will do anything. They will tear anything down. They will destroy anything. They will move heaven and earth to get what they want. And Jeremiah has seen that, and that ability of those individuals has frightened him, as it should, because there's no brake on those people at all. There's no really stopping them. The only thing that stops them is death. And one of the things that group of people is interested in is trying to find out some way to live forever. There are living creatures on the earth who, so far as we can tell, can live forever, who can revitalize themselves, reconstruct themselves. I didn't know there were so many. It was quite intriguing when I started doing research into this. And so you have these billionaires, who have started down this path, and Jeremiah has looked into the maw of that, into this world where nothing is impossible and nothing cannot be had. And that kind of, I don't know what to call it, is terrifying. It terrifies me, as a matter of fact, when I look at the world. So Jeremiah has seen it. He's looking into the abyss. And not only has the abyss looked back, but it's bought most of everything else around him.
Mm-hmm. Tom, I'm just going to pause here for a second and say we would be very happy to fold questions in to this conversation as we go along. It would be even better if the questions related to what you're saying right now, and also related to the book. However, there are a couple of questions that are standing by right now, and one of them is about appropriation of Indigenous voices and what your comment on that would be.
Oh boy. Well, that's going to be a long-standing conversation that will never find any kind of agreement on it. My stance is, as artists, I don't want to be locked down to what I can and can't do. I work with a lot of native material. I also work with a lot of non-native material. I'm Greek and Cherokee, so I sort of feel as though I can move between those two. But even if I weren't, I'd like to be able to think that I can move, almost anywhere that I want to. Now, the trick for me is that if you're going to, let's say you're a non-native, you want to write about natives. My big concern is how you go about doing that and the quality of your writing or your art. There's a writer named William Eastlake, I believe that's correct, who wrote 4 books about natives in the Southwest. He's not native, but he wrote really 4 good books. So it can be done. And, you can have a native writer who writes about the New York economic scene that doesn't have any natives in it at all. I don't see anything wrong with that. Appropriation of voice generally is set in and around people taking Indigenous stories and just sort of, running off with them, just gathering them up and then go and using them for commercial gain. And that bothers me. But it's a fine line to walk between what you can and what you can't do as an artist. And I tend to fall on the side of generosity there rather than restriction.
Also respect. Right?
And respect, yeah, respect is the key. Without the respect, and quite frankly, if you don't have respect for your material, you're not going to write well. You're not going to be able to paint well. You're not going to be able to sing well, dance well, any of that, if you've got no respect for the material that you're dealing with. It doesn't happen like that.
That was a question from Valerie McDonald. There's a question from Nancy O'Brien about the cover.
Oh yeah,
of Sufferance.
Yeah, I love the cover.
Can we talk about that?
Oh sure. Nice and shiny things.
I can see myself.
Yeah. Yeah, you're the third crow
Yikes.
on the right.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
No, it really is fantastic. Is there a story behind it?
Not really. I had crows in the book.
Yeah.
And I wanted crows on the cover. I've been trying to make friends with a couple of crows around here, but they don't want to be my friend. They just want my peanuts. Little buggers just eat my peanuts and run away. But I like crows. I have an affinity for birds, I guess. I get along with them well because they don't want to be my friends, and I don't mind. But that's about it. And of course, red foil for the cover is just makes the birds flash, makes them fly. But no, nothing really out of the ordinary. No magic story about the cover particularly.
Alan Jones, the designer.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. It's really
Jones is great.
Beautiful. There's a little crow right by your author picture too, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and he made my name so big. Wasn't that nice?
It's pretty big.
It's big. It's the first time that my name has been bigger than the title. I guess maybe I've made it. Is that what that means? I don't know.
I think that's what it means. Or your eyesight's getting worse.
Oh, my eyesight's getting really bad, which it is. I have to use a magnifying glass to look at my
Oh.
emails on the computer.
You know, you can get bifocals or trifocals or quadrifocals probably, but
Oh yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I got another question from someone who's going to be much more polite than I am. Clayton Dion. And this is a great question. He says, "Hi Tom and Sheila. Jeremiah seems to have shades of Monroe Swimmer from Truth and Bright Water. Returning to a community they were from, reclaiming a place, a church slash residential school, and refashioning it and removing symbols of that past. So is there a link between Monroe and Jeremiah?"
You know, truthfully, I hadn't even thought of that, but he's quite right. There is. Monroe Swimmer is in some ways the same kind of character, a loner. A lot of my characters are loners, but Monroe certainly is. He paints the church on the prairies out of existence. And then the last thing he says is he's going to move on to residential schools. And so there is a link I hadn't thought about, but very good for the question. Yeah, in some ways, I suppose you might think of Jeremiah as a latter-day Monroe Swimmer. I don't mind that. I think it has some attraction. Either that, or you could say, "Oh, that damn king, he just keeps writing the same characters over and over again. What a boring writer."
I don't think he's saying that. That's a great question. Thank you so much. And Pat Dickinson wants to know how long you've been working on this particular novel.
Sufferance is a long-term novel for me. I started that, I really don't know, 9, 10 years ago. And it was a very, very different novel, completely different novel when I started out. And then it became another completely different novel, and then another completely different novel. My partner, Helen Hoy, kept track of all the different variations that was Sufferance. And I think she was surprised that I actually got to finish the book, and was very surprised what the book looked like from the versions that she had read earlier on. So it was, normally my novels take me a long time. It may look like I'm fast, but that's not the case. I just happened to hit a couple of books in a row that came out fairly quickly, but most all of my books take me at least 4 or 5 years to write, and Sufferance was much, much longer than that. It was like Back of the Turtle, which took me 15 years. So I don't have that many novels. I mean, if you count my novels up, they're 5 or 6 literary novels.
There's the mysteries too, though.
There's the mysteries. There's the short stories. There's the kids' book.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if you total them up, they getting pretty close to 20.
Yeah.
But in terms of literary pieces, and that's where I think of my reputation. There aren't that many. I look like a piker, actually. I'm 78 years old. What have I done? What have you done for me tomorrow or next week? I got nothing coming down the pike now. It's just an idea.
Except you become Cecil B. DeKing.
Yeah, Cecil B. DeKing. Yeah, I'm taking up filmmaking because I need a creative break from writing, and we'll see how much trouble and disaster that creates.
Here's a question from Elaine Evanson, and I'm thrilled that she's asked it because I'm wearing the Dead Dog Cafe t-shirt right now. You can't see it, but there it is.
Woof, woof. There it is.
And Elaine wants to know, will it ever return?
Yeah, will it ever return? No, it'll never return. The old Kingston Trio song. Or was it? Yeah, I guess it was. Never mind. No, I don't think so. I think so. I think Dead Dog had its day. The reason it stopped, by the way, just so you know the history, is that it was my fault. Right in the middle of a season, I decided to run for federal office. One of those mistakes that you make in a lifetime. And it wasn't a mistake to run for federal office. It was a mistake for me to run for federal office. I'm not a politician. I'm much more dangerous in the public sphere than I am tied to a party. But I did. And the minute I did that, I had to give up Dead Dog Cafe because it would be seen as a platform for my political views. And then by the time the dust cleared and I discovered that I wasn't cut out to be a politician, CBC wasn't willing to go back to Dead Dog because, in part, they wanted to move on. I think in part because I was tainted as a political figure on that. So I don't think there's any way to get the band back together again to do Dead Dog. It'd be easy to do because the government keeps writing my scripts for me. But I don't think I could get Edna and Floyd back into a radio studio. We did it. We had a really good time with it. I think it was a good show, an interesting show, but now it's time to move on.
Tom, wasn't there talk about making it a musical?
Oh, you're being bad now. It is true that I wrote the Dead Dog Cafe, the musical, and I wrote the libretto, I wrote the songs, and I was looking to get it produced. But I don't think it was very good. I think some of the songs were fine, but I don't know the libretto was that good. And I'd have to go back and rewrite that again. Now that may happen. I don't know. It's still in my drawer somewhere, and I've got all the tunes on a CD someplace. I'm sure the top 10 are just waiting for me to release some of those puppies. But what's happened, this is the sad thing about getting older. I'm 78 now. And while my mind is still reasonably sharp, it's dragging around a 1957 Chevy body. And you can't drag a body like that around without it affecting your mind. And so it slowed me way down. I don't think as quickly as I used to. I don't move as quickly as I used to. I run out of gas of a day. I'm taking 2 and 3 naps a day where I didn't even used to not even sleep at night. But all that's in the past. And so it's just slowed me down, and I can't do as much as I want to, even though I still want to.
You're still prodigious.
Well,
when I think about what you've published, just publishing alone between 2014 and now, from the back of the turtle until now, there's been so much.
Yeah, but I went through the recycle bin carefully. Found a few tidbits that hadn't rotted completely.
Well, I am glad that Dead Dog was raised, because there's a feeling of Dead Dog, and there is a cafe in this novel. What goes on at the cafe?
Well, people eat. A matter of fact, one of my favorite things in a novel is to let people eat. Helen tells me that every novel I've ever written has a cafe there someplace where people spend most of their time eating. And I hadn't thought about it at the time, but it's true. All of my mystery novels start and end at Al's Cafe with people having breakfast. This one starts off almost every day with an espresso and a brownie at the Piggy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's me. When I go traveling in the world, my favorite activity is to find a small restaurant and sit down and have a cup of coffee and just watch the world. I love that. You want to take me to old churches and old buildings? Forget it. I find those boring as blazes. If I never see another old church, it'll be too soon. But find me a really nice cafe in Prague, and I'm there for you. I'm there for you, let me tell you.
It's also a community hub, isn't it, in this story?
It is. It is. The Piggy really is the place that people come to. It's not really a cafe. It's closed. It closed down, but the people on the reserve wouldn't let Florence close the place. And so they would just come there and insist on getting coffee. And after a while, you got a bunch of regulars who come there and they pay for their coffee, and they sit around for a while and then they go home. And those moments, I think, are important for a community, just to be able to sit together and do nothing much except just enjoy each other's company. And that's really what that's about. And if you can do it over food and coffee, so much the better.
There is a bit of a pursuit going on in Sufferance. The daughter of Jeremiah's old boss, Ash Locken, is after Jeremiah. And as you said earlier, she's not going to stop until she gets what she wants.
Yeah.
What does she want?
She wants a forecast, just as her father wanted a forecast. She wants to know what the future is going to hold. Ash is on a particularly interesting quest. Nothing that you would expect, as a matter of fact, so I'm not going to give that away. And she wants some help from Jeremiah. And I have to say that if Jeremiah wasn't tempted to give her that forecast, I sure was, just because of what her end game appears to be. So yeah, she wants that. She has the money, she has the power, she knows where Jeremiah lives, and she is not the kind of woman who is going to take no for an answer.
Speaking of, here's a question from Cindy Stewart Clark, who actually says this isn't a question, just a request to say hi to Helen. She is such a welcome voice in all of your work, and thank you for sharing. Another question is, actually, I love Helen too. I just want to register that, and I loved her role in The Inconvenient Indian. I just thought she, as your sort of Greek chorus, it was wonderful.
Well, she enters into most of my work. She enters into all of my work in one form or another. Sometimes she comes in as herself. Sometimes she comes in as a character. But she is such an interesting and complex woman that I can't resist using parts of her as characters. And she doesn't mind. I don't think. She hasn't told me if she did. She's still with me. That's a good sign. Either she's okay or she's lazy, one of the two.
We'll talk about that later.
I'll take lazy.
We being you and Helen.
Yeah.
Sarah Pietrowski says, as a bookseller, my staff and I feel this is your best book ever. That's not a question. The question is, what is your favorite of all your novels?
I love them all. It's sort of like children. You love them for different reasons. Medicine River was my first, and it'll always have a special place in my heart. Green Grass Running Water was my sort of coming out novel, and it's the one that gets taught most, I think, at universities. And it was literary gymnastics. I'll never do another book like that again. But the one that really has a spot in my heart is Truth and Bright Water. It didn't do well commercially, particularly, but it had a kind of feel to it for me that stays with me. That one right there. Certainly, The Back of the Turtle was a powerful novel for me. I'm very proud of that novel. And even Indians on Vacation, which
Honestly,
looks...
We didn't rehearse this, but...
No, which looks a little bit like a travelogue, but in the end really isn't. But Sufferance, I think Sufferance is my most mature piece of writing. I have a tendency to go over the top with the satire and the humor from time to time. To write satire, it's a balancing act, and you sort of walk a knife's edge, and you can fall either one side or another if you're not careful. And I do that all the time. But in Sufferance, I thought I was able to strike an edge to that novel and hold it all the way through. And I was pleased by that. And in the end, Helen says to me, at the end of your novels, they're so depressing, you've got to give people hope. And so generally I do give them a little bit of hope. In Sufferance, I really didn't want to give him much hope at all. And I've still, she said, you got to give them a little bit of hope. So I give them a little bit, but I like to keep that knife's edge all the way through, that clean, unrelenting kind of vision of the world.
That may in part answer another question from one of our audience members, Janelle Chan, who who says the genre is listed as humorous fiction, and from the laughter today, I understand why. But how do you find it to write humorous fiction, is Janelle's question.
Well, I don't write humorous fiction. I mean, that's how many people see it. But I don't start out writing humorous fiction. I start out writing really hardcore satire. And I try to be as brutal with that as I possibly can. I take no prisoners in my writing. But the problem with writing dark satire is that you can sort of lose your audience. And so I try to provide mine with enough fun that they don't notice just how dark it is outside, or that I've turned off the lights and left the room. I don't think of myself as a comic writer, but I know a lot of people see me as a comic writer. Well, I mean, India's on Vacation is up for a Leacock this go around. And it was sort of like, a Leacock, really? Because I think of Stephen Leacock's work, and I think about India's on Vacation, and I guess I can see some similarities there. But I keep getting moved into this sort of satiric humorous writer's role, even though I'm writing about some fairly serious stuff in Sufferance. I mean, the death of native children, an old graveyard that's the work of an old priest who cared more about religious artifacts than he did about the students under his care. That's not ha-ha stuff, particularly. But, you give a little, you take a little, and in the end, I suppose if my readers are smiling just a little bit, as long as they're bleeding at the same time, I'm all right with that.
It reminds me of the E.B. White quote, which I'm not going to correctly get, but about how humor plays close to the great big fire of truth.
Yeah.
And the reader feels the heat.
Yeah.
And I think that's very true for you.
And sometimes gets burned, or the writer gets burned. Make no mistake, I don't come away from these adventures in writing unscathed. I'm still recovering from that graveyard that I created in Sufferance, especially when we have a real life graveyard in Kamloops now to look at as well.
And many other places.
And many other places, yeah. That's the thing. If people think that's the only one that's out there, that this is an anomaly, just forget about it. It is not. It is the tip of an iceberg that runs all the way through Canada and the US.
You have to ask yourself, did your school have a graveyard? I mean, it boggles humanity. It boggles humanity.
Hi, where'd you go to school? I went to school at Toronto High. Did it have a graveyard?
There's a question.
There's a question. Did your school have a graveyard? I like that as a question, actually, that you could ask at reunions. Did your school have a graveyard? Or with friends, one of those trivia questions at a party, as you uncork that bottle of really good vintage or nice red wine, and somebody wants to make conversation, and you say, well, so tell me, did your school have a graveyard? All by itself, it just speaks volumes.
Tom, a question from Merle Susi. It really fits the theme of your book, I think. Is there a way to convince those with lots of money to help those without?
Oh boy, if I had the answer to that question, I wouldn't keep it to myself. I'd share it with the world. I don't think there is. I think the only way that that's going to happen is if those people with the money decide that this is not the kind of world that they want to live in. And so far as I can tell, the answer to that has been, no, we like this world that we're living in perfectly well. What what I love is when I hear some of these billionaires talking about all the money that they give to charities and projects and whatnot. A lot of that money is money they would lose in taxes if they didn't give it away. So it's not particularly, a gift of generosity. For the most part, it hasn't hurt their money, very much. But God Almighty, how much money do you need to live a great life? I mean, I'm not a millionaire, and I got more than enough money. I mean, when I was a kid, if I had money in my pocket at the end of the month, I was happy. Buy a few things here and there, but what can you buy? Another yacht, another jet, an island in the Caribbean or in the Straits of Georgia. Well, you could buy Gabriola, maybe. Just pluck it up off the real estate market. We live in a crazy world. It's a finite planet. And not many people act as though it's that. And that means all of us, not just the ultra wealthy, although they certainly don't have any break on their enthusiasms.
That's the thing about sufferance, Tom. I think what you realize is that we are all driving our cars and wearing the clothes that we buy and the food that we eat that comes from all over the world at the sufferance of others.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a billionaire for that.
That's right. And that's the line in the book that I like a lot. We exist at the sufferance of others. Mm-hmm. And that's where the title comes from. So, yeah. And it's true. It's true. We exist at the sufferance of others. Period.
A couple of questions related to politics.
Oh, really?
And I'm kind of going to combine them. I'm just going to ask, what gives you hope in the current moment? Or if there's anything. And I want to be specific. Might it be Indigenous leadership that you see federally? Might it be Jody Wilson-Raybould? Do you have hope?
No. The short answer, no. I think there's going to have to be more of a groundswell of support for people like Jody. I think there's going to have to be people who cross the line, as it were, and come back to a simpler way of imagining the world. I don't see that happening. You can have all the good intentions that you can dig up, but unless you have people who right now control the money and the power, it's going to be an uphill battle. And here's the reason why. Over and over again, what protests have shown is that the wealthy and the insulated are willing to wait anything out. And they know that we only have so much energy and so much money to put behind a push. And when that's gone, that wave sort of breaks on the shore and they're fine and safe again. Their way of life, their insulated existence is saved. And I would love to think that that's going to crack, but if it's going to crack, I think it has to crack from within that group. I don't think we're going to be able to beat down their doors. We're just not that well organized. We're just not that well committed. It's not that there aren't people who are, and it's not that there aren't groups that are. They're not large enough or strong enough. They don't have the kind of staying power to make that happen. And we shouldn't have to do that. We should have the people who, the privileged and the rich, should be smart enough to figure it out that unless they're part of the worldwide community, they got nothing going for them. What they have is isolation, and they can play with their money and have their toys, but they live in the same world we live in. They die the same way that we die, and their life is not unlimited. So get with the program. This is the planet we have to give to our grandchildren. We're not doing a very good job. We're going to give them a corpse if we're not careful. My next novel.
Good. There's another. Tom.
Maybe.
This is very interesting. Rosemary Hill says, you are a great storyteller. And Lala is a young girl who will stay with me as I hear the horror stories. I wanted to end by asking you about the character of Lala. Who inspired Lala?
Lala comes to me directly from my 4-year-old granddaughter, whose name is Lala. It's not Lala, it's Ariella. But she didn't think, I don't know if she thought Ariella was too long to pronounce or what, but she began calling herself Lala. And so we call her Lala. I like the name, as a matter of fact. There's a kind of playful exuberance to it.
Like Shilala.
Yeah, You be careful. I'll start calling you Shilala.
I should never, ever give you anything, ever.
No, that's true. But no,
yeah.
she comes straight to me from the enthusiasm that my 4-year-old granddaughter has. And she always says something to me, or she sees something in a particular way that I hadn't expected. And children do this, of course, all the time. It's not just that I've got a special granddaughter. She is special, but she's special for me. But other kids see the world in a different way, and they'll say things about it. They give you observations that sort of set you back on your heels. And so that's where Lala comes from. And she was a delight to write because I had the model right there on my lap almost. Well, we haven't been able to see her for over a year because of COVID, but yeah, she was the model for that.
And what does she mean to Jeremiah Camp?
Well, Jeremiah tries to avoid her and put her off to one side because he really doesn't want to be drawn back into the world. And Lala just doesn't leave him alone. She sees him, I don't know, as a plaything, perhaps, somebody who can do things with her. She's irrepressible. And no matter how hard Jeremiah tries to sort of back away, Lala is there. And I guess a part of Jeremiah does want to connect with her because there's a kind of purity to her spirit and the way in which he sees the world. And Jeremiah hasn't seen that very often in his lifetime, in his adult lifetime. And so on the one hand, he wants to be alone. On the other hand, there is a kind of enthusiasm for Lala as she looks at the world. And Jeremiah doesn't mind seeing the world through her eyes every so often.
She is hope, I think.
Yeah, I suppose in sufferance, if there's any hope in sufferance, it's probably Lala. And you hope it doesn't get beaten out of her.
Do you see the face that's underneath me? At least on my screen, Mike Miller from HarperCollins.
Oh, there he is.
He's kind of like the orchestra at the Academy Awards.
Is this the guy with the hook?
This is the guy with the hook. Before you hook us off, thank you again, Tom. It's always an honor. And thanks so much to the audience for such great questions.
Yeah.
Lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Sheila, for taking the time to talk with Tom about this wonderful, fantastic novel, Sufferance. And thank you, Tom, for coming on tonight to talk about this. Oh. And the thanks don't stop here. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in from coast to coast and all of the bookstores who have participated in this initiative as well, the independent bookstores across Canada. So thanks everybody for participating in this. And this was our grand finale for our IndieFest series for the spring. And we will be releasing the wonderful events that we have scheduled for the fall in the next couple of days. I have included the link in the chat box there where you can learn more once we release those events. So thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful night.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye all.
Good night.
Wado.